Welcome, everybody. My name is Georgine Huang, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Fairy God Boss. I'm so excited because today we are all here for an interactive discussion about how to successfully job search, apply, and interview for your dream job. You will be hearing from talent acquisition professionals at Eaton, a partner of Fairy God Boss, and they will, the panelists from Eaton will introduce themselves in a minute. If you aren't aware of Eaton, their mission is to improve the quality of life and the environment through the use of power management technologies and services. Eaton provides sustainable solutions that help their customers effectively manage electrical, hydraulic, and mechanical power more safely, more efficiently, and more reliably. Eaton sells products to customers in more than 175 countries around the world and has approximately 85,000 employees. So this is a team that knows a lot about what it means to recruit, interview, and look at resumes. Ladies, would you each take a couple of minutes to please introduce yourselves? Please tell the audience your role, your location, how long you've been at Eaton. And Frances, we can start with you.
Sure, happy to be here. I'm Frances Holly. I've been with Eaton for a little over 8 years, and I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of our different business groups. I currently am the HR leader for one of our aerospace divisions, and I reside out of the greater Detroit metropolitan area with my husband, and I have 3 children, all girls. So when I'm not working, I'm an active dance mom and volleyball mom.
Fun. Lisa, what about you?
Hi, everyone. Lisa Gakowski. I sit out of our corporate headquarters in Cleveland, Ohio, actually Beechwood, but right outside of Cleveland. I've been with Eaton for almost 6 years and coming up in August, and currently a part of our executive talent team supporting leadership roles. But I've supported roles all across all different levels of the organization and function. So really looking forward to, hearing all the questions you guys have. I'm also a newer working mom. So really, shout out to all the working moms out there when you almost are leaving one job to go to the next. So I will say my multitasking and organization skills have turned next level after that. But, again, shout out to all the working moms out there. So looking forward to being here with you guys today.
Last but not least, Mariana.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mariana Paioletti. I am originally from Brazil, but right now I live in Mexico, in Querétaro, which is a city very close to Mexico City. My current role at Eaton is talent acquisition manager for Latin America. In July, I will be with Eaton for 4 years. And my previous experience was more on the HR OD functions. I married for almost 12 years now. My husband is Mexican, and I am a mom to Juliana, who's 7, Bruno, who's almost 2. I'm very happy to be here with you guys today.
It's great to have you all. And I also have 3 kids, so this is a panel of working moms. I'm very excited about our discussion today. I'd like to remind everyone tuning in that we will be taking and making room for questions from the audience. So please submit your questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll do our best to respond as many as we can. Now, without further ado, let's just dive right in. The question, I think, on a lot of the Fairy God Boss members' minds who are tuning in today is how to put your best foot forward as a candidate when you're applying and interviewing for a job. So let's start with the first step, which is often looking at your resume. What do recruiters look for in a resume, regardless of what the role is? What can candidates do and include on their resumes or applications to make them stand out? Lisa, do you want to take that?
Sure. So, it sounds really simple, but often something that's overlooked is the spell checking and consistent formatting. So as people add new jobs to their resume, sometimes the spacing is different or the font is different. And when we're going through multiple applications, attention to detail is huge because that's how you're going to be communicating with hiring managers and customers. So we definitely take a look at that. And, I'd say also sometimes when we see a resume that has a lot of bullet points about, previous jobs, but maybe only one bullet point about their current role, I'd say make sure that you're more heavy on top with your bullet points and, filter off towards the end. We're definitely more interested in hearing what you've been doing in more current experience. And then, another tip I would recommend is I think a lot of times people feel like they have to submit with a cover letter, and that's just not the case. I think you're better off, spending your time, not even submitting a cover letter, and taking that extra time and using it to tailor your specific resume. So, depending on the role that you're applying to, make yourself stand out a little bit more.
Absolutely. Great advice. Mariana, what about you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your resume should show your key skills and competencies, and that needs to match the role that you're applying to. So I definitely agree with Lisa. I think that your time is better off spent tailoring your resume to that specific role versus a cover letter. To be completely honest, I don't remember the last time that I looked at a cover letter, to be really honest with everybody. So I think that's a great point. I think one way to do that tailoring is going to the job description, the role, trying to identify what are those specific skills, those competencies, and then go into your experience to find where that matches. And those matches are the ones that you should be including in your resume to make sure that it stands out. Another tip that I can give that I personally like is when the resume is not only bullets and a list maybe of your main activities and responsibilities, but also include achievements and results and numbers. Personally, when I'm looking at a resume and I see that a number, a hard fact, it catches my eye and I wonder, how did she do that? And then I immediately want to talk to that candidate. So I think those are two good tips to make sure that your resume stands out from the bunch.
Right. Numbers can really break up a lot of text on a resume.
Yes.
So when it comes to making sure that resume that is now tailored and includes data, it gets past the application systems that a company might use, how do you suggest that women get their resumes through these applicant tracking systems? For example, do you recommend that candidates reach out to current recruiters or employees at a company for informational interviews before applying or alongside their application? Francis, do you have a point of view?
I do, and I would say absolutely. I get lots of messages probably on a weekly basis from people that I know and I don't know, particularly on LinkedIn, intrigued and looking for opportunities about Eaton and wanting to learn even my perspective about the organization and my experience as an employee. I would say if you are going to reach out to someone that works for the organization, particularly if you don't know them and it's almost like a cold connection, when you reach out, put some content in that message. Help us understand how we can help you, give details, the job, the organization, when you applied, how you found us, right? You're a mutual connection that I found from somebody else on LinkedIn. That's more than appropriate to do so. And I actually have a lot of respect for people that, take that bold initiative to reach out to me directly. It shows me that you have some savviness and some assertiveness. And those are competencies that we're always looking for talent that we're hiring in the organization and developing talent that are work in our organization as well. I also want to say it's important to use those connections and find an employee connection if you can, because look, we incentivize our employees to recruit talent for us. All of our employees at Eaton are ambassadors for our organization, talent scouts. And so if you do reach out to an employee, they can submit your resume and your candidacy through our global employee referral program. Most of our roles are eligible for referral. And not only you at that time get a benefit from that connection, but perhaps also our employee if you're hired. So definitely, I think it's worth reaching out and taking an extra step.
Great. Lisa, what's your point of view?
Yeah, and Francis, great points to that. I'd really challenge everyone get back to the basics and really leverage your network, your friends, your family. You should be actively talking about your search and not relying on, a system to get past. I think that, most companies have searchable databases, so we can go back and look. So, don't be discouraged if you don't get, spoken to on, the first time around. So just know that you're planting those seeds and something will populate from there.
Okay, great advice. So let's assume that we've gotten through with a great resume through that process and we are now at the interview stage. Do you have any advice about what to do or what not to do? Are there any mistakes that you've seen people make in the past when applying at the interview stage? Mariana.
Yeah, thank you, Georgine. So I think definitely a common mistake is not preparing for the interview. And maybe that sounds weird because, why should I prepare? I know my experience, I know what I have done. So how do I prepare? You need to make sure that the interviewers and the people that you talk to at the company can understand that. It can also know that experience and what you have worked on. So, interviews have changed. Before maybe interviews was going through your resume and telling your activities and your responsibilities, or maybe even questions like, what would you do if, or, hypothetical situations, or even like the typicals, your 3 strengths and your 3 opportunity or development areas. And that's changed, at least for Eaton, it's definitely changed, and that's not how we assess the talent. So what we use is behavioral interview, is competency-based interview. So we want to know what you have done and how that worked for you. So we ask for specific examples, or maybe we're interviewing for a customer service role and we will ask, tell me about a time where you had a difficult client and what did you do to ensure a positive relationship. And you need to prepare that, because if it catches you by surprise, maybe you will not give all the details or will not be the best example. So that's something that you should definitely prepare. Have your examples ready, especially if you put the data and the results and the accomplishments on your resume. Make sure that you're able to explain exactly how you achieve that. Yeah,
Great point. Francis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off of what Mariana just said, and preparation is key. I find that a lot of time candidates are not giving us the full story when we're interviewing with them. If you're familiar with the STAR method, situation, task, action, result, I usually get the S and the T, but I'm not able to pull through all the time from the candidate the results, like how you actually impacted the organization or the situation at that specific period of time. So my recommendation is definitely to prepare, look at the job description. Mariana also highlighted that in her previous response, but look at the job description, look at those key words, the verbs that are used, and are you coming to the interview able to articulate and bring those examples to life? I just interviewed someone recently for a position, and the position clearly was a strategy role. Strategy was in the job title. The job description highly reflected that we were looking for someone with strategic capabilities. However, the candidate only provided examples in an interview that were tactical and process oriented, talked and highlighted about how they executed on initiatives, but it did not give an example or examples that really showed how they created, developed a strategy and deployed it. And we had all that woven through the thread of the job description, so the information was out there. And when that happens, when a candidate is not giving strong examples to help us assess their talent or help me assess their talent, I have to probe a lot. And when I'm probing a lot in an interview to kind of pull more information through, the interview experience, at least for me as an interviewer, becomes very transactional. And I want the interview experience to be conversational. I want it to be an experience where I'm learning about you as the candidate, but also you'll have the opportunity to learn more about us as an organization. And that probing and that iterative process that occurs when someone's not prepared really can derail the opportunity to really find the right fit for us in the organization.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's take a minute, because I'm seeing some questions from the audience, to answer some of those. Let's start with actually the resume, which is how we started our panel conversation. Allison in the audience is asking if there is a stigma surrounding one-page resumes, or I've seen this discussed in the Fairy God Boss community as well. How long is too long? Is one page too short? Is there a length that depends on the industry or your type of experience?
I can take this one. So I would say one page is nice, but it's not the standard, and you don't have to fit all your information, especially for someone who's been in the workforce. It'd be nearly impossible to fit all your experience on one page. So, make sure it's not, 4 pages, but it's definitely okay if it's multi-page. I avoid putting your picture on it, or, maybe even some of your hobbies, keep that for in conversation, and really focused on what Mariana had said earlier, just like those key points that you can talk about, that your accomplishments that you can talk about and that someone would want to elaborate further on. So I'd say no standard, and make sure that the font isn't, crazy small to try and compact, or really big in spacing, because all of that, again, is presentation and it matters.
Okay, great. On the opposite side of the spectrum, maybe somebody who's joining the workforce for the first time, someone is asking about, they're graduating next week, congratulations, and they're looking for a job. So in this situation, it's probably unlikely someone will have a 2-page resume, but any advice for what a first-time new student should include or think about when it comes to the resume and application process?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think that even if there's no corporate experience while you're studying, maybe there's some internship, so that's definitely something that you should explore. But projects or extracurricular activities that can showcase maybe, I don't know, leadership skills, or maybe you worked on some sort of conference and that can showcase some organization and prioritizing. So I think that not minimize experiences and not go to, oh, I don't have any experience. I mean, just studying and graduating and going to college is an experience by itself. So seeing, and again, going back to the position and started seeing what is the position you're looking for and what do I have to offer that I need to showcase and include in my resume. But I think all experiences are good experiences, and it's fair to put them in your resume.
Absolutely. To add on to that, even if, you worked at an ice cream shop, it wouldn't obviously apply to the role that you're applying to, but the fact that you were there for multiple years, and I think says something. So, think about that in when it's your first, job that you're applying for. So.
And I'm going to add on to that. I would say not just for those that are, entering the workforce for their first professional role, but those of us that have been working for a while, we are doing a lot of our kids' activities, PTO, right? HOA, president, whatever you have, board members in the community. And a lot of those experiences, you are gaining skills that you may not be able to readily use all the time in your day role, your day job, but they're important to highlight, I think, as well on your resume, to add some more texture or context to the full picture of all your experiences that you have, not just in the professional setting.
Great. Natasha, we're talking a lot about resume and what to include and not to include. So I'm going to stick with that theme for this next question. Natasha is asking, she has 20 plus years of experience. Do you suggest that she include it all on her resume? And if not, how far back should somebody go who has a lot of experience?
I could take this one. So I would say definitely highlight all of the experience, but maybe the role that you had 20 years ago is just the title, the time period, and the company. So you don't have to go super in depth. I would say really looking at the bullet points and expanding those out in the last 10 years, I would say would be most beneficial and where you could benefit your time. But we, find value in people that have been in the workforce for numerous years, because you're going to bring, knowledge to the table that someone doesn't have. So I think it's definitely important to still highlight.
Okay, great. along the same lines, but a little different. Someone, Erin, in the audience is saying that she's worked for the same company for 10 years. And so with respect to her resume, she worked herself up from being an EA and got a master's degree while working, but she's concerned that her lack of experience in different companies is negatively affecting her. So is this something she should lean into, try to get around? Any advice about what to do during the resume or application process?
I can take this one. I don't think so. I mean, I think it's great that she's been in the company for so long in different roles, maybe even different functions. So definitely those different roles need to be there to also see what the career was like and the development was like. But I don't think that's something that should be a challenge. I mean, there are even some hiring managers that appreciate that, saying, she has stayed in their company, she has grown in their company. So I don't think that's a problem at all. And congratulations for the master.
Okay. One last resume question, and then we'll go back to our conversation. Do you have any advice for someone looking to move industries? In that case, a resume may showcase, for example, a set of experiences that may be less relevant to the new role or industry you're trying to join. Is it okay to leave off some of those experiences that don't relate? Is it better in this situation to use a functional resume, which lists out categories of experience rather than a chronological one?
I can take this one. So, I would not say don't do one where it, breaks down the functions. But I would say the chronological paints the picture. You don't want your resume to have holes on it, because sometimes I always say that creates more questions than you want your resume to answer those questions, not create questions. So I would keep that in mind. I would say when you're applying to organizations, larger organizations may be looking for something very specific. And so that might not be where you want to. I think you might have a better opportunity switching completely, if you're switching gears to a smaller organization. They may be more open. Obviously, we have a lot of shifts internally, but we also know those individuals as well. So we're less likely to take a complete risk on an external as opposed to an internal who we know is a valued employee. So maybe looking at smaller to mid-sized organizations could be a starting point as well. If it's a complete 180 shift.
Okay.
To add on that, I think that talking about competencies, probably something that you should try to showcase is learning agility and adaptability that could show that you could do well in a different industry, even though you haven't been there. So maybe you did, a cross-functional project and you worked with something that was completely out of your scope. So that may be something that is worth exploring to make sure that that company can see that you have the adaptability skills and the learning that maybe would take a little bit more, but you could do that.
Great.
And I'm just going to jump in here and just say, when you do get an interview for someone in a similar in that situation, make sure that you're able to talk about your experiences. Help us, connect the dots for how your experiences in a different industry is relevant to our position. And oftentimes I'm finding as well that people aren't preparing for the interviews and they're struggling with having to with articulating their experiences and how they connect. We can see it on the interview as the hiring team, but we also are looking for you to share it with us as well too.
Right. Changing topics slightly, I want to share that Fairy God Boss often surveys our user base. And recently we saw in a job seeker survey that the women in the community said the most frustrating part of the job search was being ghosted. We are going to put a live poll into this chat. And we will ask the audience here to share their number one frustration in the job search. But while they're responding, Can you on the panel give insights into why this is happening? Why do candidates experience ghosting, and what can someone do to avoid that? Lisa, let's start with you.
So I would say, first off, we always focus on the candidate experience here at Eaton. So it would never be our intention to ghost a candidate. And apologize, we're in a smart building, so my lights keep on going out. But with that being said, it's kind of like interviewing is like dating. So if you don't hear something, reach out. I mean, it could just be a human error where we're not, if we overlook something. And, some recruiters have a very heavy workload. So you can imagine if they have multiple positions and they have multiple candidates, again, it just could be a really common, overlook. So don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, and Mariana, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely, I agree with Lisa. We always try, and candidate experience is something that we really value at our processes at Eaton, but sometimes, recruiters have a lot of requisitions and a lot of candidates that they are talking to, and, it can slip out. It happens to the best of us. So you definitely reach out, ask what's going on. Am I still in the process? Am I not in the process? I think that's really, really fair, especially if it's an opportunity that you think is the one for you, is good for you. You should definitely reach out. And also, it's never the recruiter's intention to ghost anyone, but sometimes it happens. Sometimes it just slips out. So it's good to put that reminder out there for the recruiters as well.
Absolutely. Don't take it personally. It may just be an oversight.
Exactly.
So another thing we hear from our community is that it can feel really challenging to do virtual interviews. More and more video interviews are happening versus in-person ones. Do you have any advice for what to do to present yourselves well on a video interview, and how to make a genuine connection through a virtual interview process? And what's Eaton's process like? Is it in person? Is it virtual when it comes to interviews?
Yeah, I can jump in here as from the hiring manager's standpoint. Even before the pandemic, I think probably 98% of the interviews I've done were virtual. So it's a very comfortable space that I am and used to assess talent and connect with talent. And the way I approach the situation is, don't let the monitor get in the way of you making the connection. Treat the experience just like you are talking to someone and you're sitting right across from them. And I think sometimes people get a little bit, let the monitor be a barrier for making that connection, and it shouldn't be. The other thing I would say is, and I hate to keep saying this, but it's the preparation. If you're not comfortable with technology, or you're not comfortable using the different platforms like Zoom, Teams, whatever it may be that the organization you're interviewing with uses, then dial in early, get used and comfortable to using that platform. I've had candidates where I've interviewed them and it has been complete black blob in the background, meaning like I can see them, but all I could see is a shadow, because they weren't aware what their lighting was going to look like before they joined the interview. I've had people not be comfortable with muting, didn't know how to, transition between going on mute, off mute. So it was a little bit of an awkward, dynamic or situation. And I've also had people not look directly at me in the camera. Not sure if they were looking at a wall, they were nervous, they had two monitors, I'm not sure, but they didn't make eye contact with me the entire time. And I took it more so as that person or that job seeker was just not comfortable in the space and connecting with someone virtually. And so I would say get comfortable with it, use your friends, get on a Teams call or Zoom call and practice that in advance if it's not a space that you're used to being in when connecting with a job seeker or employer.
Great. Lisa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, great points, Francis. Just to kind of elaborate or piggyback on that, we are, so to Francis' point, we didn't do virtual interviews prior to COVID. And when we were in COVID, that was our only option. So, and now that we're kind of slowly weathering the storm and getting out of that, we still have teams that rely on it, especially since we're a global organization and some of the stakeholders that are interviewing you could be in different locations. So, think of, I sit in in Cleveland, Ohio, but teams I work with are all across the United States. So I'm holding virtual meetings all day long. So that's something that we want you to be comfortable with. And to Francis's point, like your background matters. What you have in your background, if it's busy or messy, you don't want our eyes to be drawn to those pieces. So, if it's Microsoft Teams, use one of their backgrounds, or, think of those things. And, this is the new working way. So, something that we're going to have to get comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable, practice does make perfect. Well, not perfect, but make you more comfortable at least.
All right. So let's take another set of questions from the audience, because I'm seeing the Q&A blow up a little bit. This is an early question that I thought was interesting. We've been talking a lot as if the recruiting and application process is from somebody outside the company. If you're applying internally for a role at your existing employer, would you change any of your advice? Would you tailor that application process differently?
I would say not necessarily, no. I would think if you're applying internally for with your organization, I think it's even more important to reach out and make those connections. I often find it kind of interesting when I have an internal candidate apply for a job. I'm like, hey, why didn't you reach out? We could have talked about this in advance. We could have helped you understand, what we're looking for, the criteria for the position in advance of your applications. I think if you're an internal candidate, you have more leverage, more opportunities to really assess not only if this is the right role for you, right, but also if you want to apply for it in the first place. So, let's not waste time if you have the resources to make the best decision for yourself at your fingertips, for sure.
Yeah, and I would say even leveraging your current boss as well. Imagine if you were managing people and then all of a sudden you find out that your employee had submitted for a role that you didn't know about. So I think keeping that in mind, you are, we talk about like you have an Eaton brand. So it's like, who are you to, and what can you contribute to the organization? Something like a reputation. And so you want your reputation to, speak highly of yourself before you even submit that application. So to Francis's point, you should absolutely be putting time on their calendar, 15 minutes. Hey, I'd love to hear more about your position that you have open. And maybe that's not where you have to, rope in your hiring manager, your manager. But if you're applying for a role, you should absolutely, have, the backing of your employer as well.
Great. Another thing that's becoming very common, and someone asks about, Irene, is freelance experience. Increasingly, and particularly over the last couple of years, there's been an increase in people taking on contract work or independent contract work. So what is the best way to include that experience on a resume? Is it different than full-time experience? Do you need to call it out? Do you need to explain it differently?
I think it's similar as well to the question about the being my first job and not having experience. I mean, freelance experience is experience. Sometimes it can even be more challenging than maybe the full-time job, and it can help you develop different competencies and different skills. So I don't really see why that should be any different. It should be definitely in your resume, and you should definitely talk about. And some of your examples come from that freelance experience. You should definitely use them.
Mm-hmm. And maybe just call out contract opportunity so that someone sees that, because if you are moving every 6 months, that's not a bad thing if you are in the contract world. But if you're applying to a full-time position, someone might think that you're just making those moves. So I think it's important to highlight that piece as well.
Relatedly, I just saw a question about somebody who owned their own business. Let me just try to find it. Someone was asking about whether to describe the experience of owning their own business essentially the same as just an outside employment experience on their resume, and how to talk about results with respect to that. would you treat it any differently?
I would say no. I think it's experience that you can bring to the table. And like we've talked about before, I think it's just relating that experience to the current role that you're applying for, because it's still great experience. It just, it doesn't fit in a cookie cutter box, and that's okay.
Okay. Sounds good. And one person, I know we talked about cover letters earlier, and Mariana, you had a point of view, but somebody in the audience is asking anonymously that some companies use systems that require a cover letter in the application process. In those situations, what do you recommend is the best way to approach it? Should you include something that's, she says, what should I include? Length? Is it 3 paragraphs too short? Is 5 too long? Is there anything you would suggest?
That if you have to do it, then definitely take that opportunity to highlight even more your experience and what matches from what the company is looking for. I would say maybe a couple of paragraphs. I wouldn't go really deep into that, but take advantage of maybe those 2 paragraphs to then really highlight your experience versus what the position the company is looking for.
Great.
Hey, Georgine, on to the cover letter comment, because I see a lot of comments coming through in the chat. I would also give this recommendation, turn your cover letter into your elevator pitch. You don't necessarily have to have it, something that you're attaching in a job applicant tracking system. But if you know that, that elevator pitch, and you're using the kind of the format, the philosophy, methodology of a cover letter as for how you introduce yourself on the first call for a recruiter, or how you start off, your conversation when you're interviewing with an employer, then I think that goes a long way. I also would recommend, for people that have unique experiences. I see someone that's taken some time off in the chat because they were a caregiver for their parents. That may be appropriate to add in the cover letter, but it may not be, again, an actual cover letter that you're attaching along with your resume. It could be what you're, using as a template to send an email or a direct message via LinkedIn. So I would say there's other ways to kind of highlight your experiences and leverage this kind of same methodology or concept of using a cover letter.
Great. There is a question about LinkedIn profiles, and she mentioned LinkedIn profile a couple times, Francis. Someone says, okay, there's no photo you should include on your resume, but what about your LinkedIn profile? Is it necessary or a good idea to have a photo on your LinkedIn profile? Love to hear the answer or your opinions on this one.
I can take or start at least. So I would say yes. And I know it sounds like I said no for the resume. I think the resume is that it's supposed to be the text. LinkedIn is, a platform where it is offering that, and it's pretty standard. I would use that like your living resume. So all the bullet points that you have on your resume, you should just, simply copy and paste and put that in your LinkedIn profile. I solely am sourcing for a lot of my opportunities because I'm looking for a specific skill set for the jobs that I support. So I am on LinkedIn every day. So I think if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, absolutely put one together, even if it's, companies and job titles. And, we're using keywords to search. So any of the keywords that you can use to describe what you're doing can only have you populate into these searches, which in turn will have us reaching out to you instead of you having to look for an opportunity. So it's a huge, tool that you can leverage and can really, set you apart if you complete the profile.
I agree, Lisa. My comment about not having pictures on LinkedIn in your profile, and I've said this to other people, I was like, hey, LinkedIn is not an archive of resumes, right? It's not a repository of resumes. It is a social platform for professionals. And so having, a picture and completing your profile, allows not only you, but people that are trying to connect with you to optimize their ability to make that connection with you socially in this professional space.
Mm-hmm. And I just saw in the chat, someone had talked about connections. Do we look at that? that doesn't even make a difference. I don't care if you're not connected to anyone on LinkedIn. I'm not worried about your connections. I'm worried about you and your experience. So, don't worry about connecting with people. Let this be a vehicle for you to, maybe open up another door where you can have somebody reaching out to you instead of you, always doing the initiation piece.
I love all of these questions, but we're going to take a break from the questions in the audience for now and go on to sort of interview questions, because we didn't focus that much on the interview yet today. Well, are there any questions that you always ask of applicants? And what do you think are the best questions for an applicant to ask you during the interview process?
Yeah, so I always ask why Eaton, why this role? I really like to understand what is the motivation, the intention behind that candidate applying. I think that it's really important as a candidate to know why you're applying to that position, why that position would be a good next step for your professional development in your professional career. So I always like to ask that. In terms of the questions that candidates should ask, I would say pretty much anything that can give you as a candidate insight if that's the correct company and the correct role for you. So again, go back to the job posting, to the job description, anything that you think is important for you to make a decision. If you're in the position to make a decision to take the position or not, what information would you like to have? So what's the team like? What are the responsibilities? What's the scope? What are the main challenges? What are the metrics and the KPIs? So anything with the position related to the position that will make you say, yes, I made the correct choice by applying, or maybe say, oh, after the interview, the position, I realized that position is not for me, which is really fair. I would also encourage candidates to ask about the company. What's the company like? What's the values? What's the mission? What's the vision? I think it's really important to work at a company that the values are aligned with your own, and that you can get a lot of that from just asking questions. On the interview, there's a very hot topic now that we mentioned briefly in terms of post-pandemic and flexible work solutions. So if that's something that's important for you, if that's something that could be a game changer in terms of accepting or not a job offer, ask about it. Is remote working available for this role? Is it not? I think that it's completely fair to ask if it's something that is important to you. And last, I would say about the process. Sometimes as a candidate, there's a lot of anxiety and the ghosting. Will they call me? Will they not call me? What's next? So ask about the process. How many interviews will I have? Who will I be talking to? What's the timeline, to make sure that you feel more comfortable as a candidate? So I would say there are no questions off the table, as long as they give you insights to make sure that that's the position and the role for you.
Yeah, all good points, Mariana. I would say, I definitely ask 2 questions to every candidate at the end of the interview. And it's really because we, particularly at Eaton, we are a learning culture. We have a strong culture of continuous improvement. And so I want to know, how that sits with the candidate as well for themselves personally. So I always ask someone internally and externally, what are you doing to develop yourself? And how does this role fit into your short-term and long-term career plans? Those are just 2 questions that I always ask everyone. But I also think from a job seeker perspective, really to ask intentional questions to the hiring team. Oftentimes I get kind of the canned questions, things that I can't even answer. I could tell someone that the day of the interview, maybe went on our website or went on Twitter or LinkedIn page and saw a hotline or a headline and they asked me a question, and I hadn't even seen it yet. So it's not a meaningful discussion that we're about to have, or I can't give you a meaningful answer. So be intentional about your questions, particularly if I'm in HR. Ask me questions about HR, the employee experience. Ask me about the leadership style of the hiring manager. Get as much intel as possible from the person that you're connecting with so you can make the right decision. And on that comment, I would say, companies are different now. We have a lot of organizations have gone through a lot of transformation over the past couple of years, and we do a great job at selling you on why you should choose us. But I think you should be inquisitive as a job seeker and don't just listen to what we say as far as our current status, our future focus. Go back and ask us, this is great that you're trying to grow your business, but how did you perform last year? And, because it could be a different story, and I could give you a lot of intel or insight on, what headwinds or challenges you may face when you first join a role. And I asked in every job I've interviewed for, internally and externally, what are some of the challenges that I may face within the first 90 days? And I also ask questions when I've interviewed internally and externally in my career. What competencies do I need to immediately demonstrate in this role to be successful? Because for me, I could get a job offer, but if I get the job offer after the interview, I want to be confident when I say yes and I accept the role. And I also want to know, as a job seeker that's getting an offer, that I can definitely make an impact in the organization, like Mariana said, is aligned with my values, my career interests, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a great segue to the next question I have for you all, which is, what about the search process at Eaton specifically? For those in the audience who are interested in working at Eaton, what insights can you share about what the interview process at Eaton might look like? Lisa, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So I would say our process is pretty standard, but of course there can be nuances for every hiring team. But typically you would connect with a recruiter to start, where we'd be talking more general questions, maybe some specific ones, but I'd say more higher level. Then the next step would be connecting with the hiring manager. In the past, most of those were phone screens, but as we move to new age, a lot can be already starting on the video interview side, conversation wise. And then typically there's a final interview where we've talked about the behavioral based interview questions. So, I encourage you guys, if you Google behavioral based interview questions, there can be a lot of them. Don't get overwhelmed by that. Maybe just think of common themes of like projects you've worked on and how you're able to, move those forward. And to Francis's part, like the STAR method, answering that is great, but also, we're looking for what your learning agility is as well. So how have you applied that to another situation? So, what we've spoken about before, always focus on the candidate experience. So we're completely understanding you're choosing us just as much as we are choosing you. But, this is your opportunity to make sure you're making the right decision. I always, relate job search and you'll hear anecdotes from me from the dating process, but you are, you want to make sure that you want to date this person. And what do? You want to find out more information. So this is your opportunity to do so.
Yeah, definitely. I would say also, I saw that our career site link just popped out, is make sure specifically the process at Eaton, make sure that you have your profile there, that your profile is updated. That's the first place that recruiters go when we have a position. And another thing from the interview process, I think, as Lisa mentioned, candidate experience is something that we really value and we really focus on. And we try to be really respectful of our candidates' times, because we know that sometimes that implies taking time off work and having to step away from maybe 1 hour from your day to take that interview. So we always, with our hiring teams, we always encourage them to have panel interviews. So maybe expect having an interview with not 5 people. That's something that we do not encourage at all, because it's going to the other side. But definitely expect panel interviews, maybe HR and the supervisor at the same time. That also really helps calibrating, and the decision making process is easier as well.
Okay. There are so many good questions. I think we're going to turn to the audience questions now. There is a question from somebody who raises the confidence gap, which is something that Fairy Godboss knows quite a lot about, which is the idea that when a woman sees a job posting and thinks she's not qualified because there are 2 or 3 requirements that she doesn't meet in the job description, she says that her partner says, just apply because this is a job that's perfect for you. She says, I'm learning that men and women are different, and that men have a fake it till you make it attitude, whereas women can have a I must be able to check every box before I can apply attitude. We talked about making sure, Francis, earlier, that you have the competencies to be successful, because it's not just landing the role and it's also being successful. And I think it's a very conscientious person who's asking this question. What would you say to her in terms of how to express the quality she does have to succeed in the role, even if she may not have the perfect fit in terms of the requirements or experience?
On a resume, that might be a little bit hard to kind of express that, but I would say, one, apply for the role. Because especially with this market that we have today, our recruiters are getting creative at times, I would say, and really spending a lot of time on finding talent, because it's hard to find talent and good talent today in the marketplace. And so apply for the role. I would tell somebody the worst you can get is a no. And so you shoot your shot while you can, and the opportunities is there. And I would say oftentimes, we've had this happen where I'm on the phone for a recruiter. I'm like, okay, you can't find anybody with these qualifications. Tell me who's applying for the role and what their qualifications look like. Okay, we asked for 7 years. Maybe you see somebody with 5 years. Okay, well, let's go back and, if we can, if it makes sense, if it's not going to impact the business, cause any equity issues internally, we do our due diligence. But if we can make an exception and make modifications to the job requirements, then we will, because we don't want to miss out on good talent. But there are some things, yes, that are non-negotiable that we have to have from a requirement or competency standpoint. But like I said, I would apply, because you never know, if it's not that opportunity, it could be an opportunity that we could have down the line. Sometimes where people are applying for jobs, and before you know it, another position opens up, and we can have the opportunity to take someone with a different qualification than what we initially anticipated for as well. So you applying, get yourself in the network, in our system, and our recruiters can do their thing for us behind the scenes and search for talent in our system, and help us see the availability of talent that's interested in Eaton, to help the hiring team make not only the right decision for the current role they're hiring for, but also have an understanding for what's available for future roles that we may be looking for as well.
Yeah, I completely, sorry. I completely agree with Francis. I think when in doubt, apply. There's no perfect candidate. Nobody checks all the boxes. Male, female, whatever. Nobody checks all the boxes. There are always things that, as an organization, we need to understand and be aware that we'll have to develop internally. So don't let that maybe not checking all the boxes make you not apply. When in doubt, you should definitely apply. Although job searching is also a self-assessment, and there's a lot of self-awareness that needs to be there. I mean, if you're entry level, don't apply for a manager role or a director role. It's not going to work. But if the gap is not a lot, and you think that you have the skills to learn, again, like Lisa and Francis mentioned, growth, agility, adaptability, I think go for it.
Yes,
and
go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say that I love the Henry Ford quote, like, if you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you can't. So just remember, like, you are the person who's, putting yourself in the game or taking yourself out. So, don't let yourself be your biggest barrier.
To add to what you all said, I also agree. And there is a link in the chat to the talent community at Eaton. So if you don't see a role that you think that you're a perfect fit for, you can also join the talent community at Eaton to find opportunities that may come up later. And someone else in the chat shares a story that they applied for a job they were unqualified for, admitted it in the cover letter, but still got an offer to come interview for another job. So you just never know. I think the last set of audience questions I want to tackle here is around salary, because I'm seeing a few different flavors of the same question, which is, what do you do if you're asked the awkward question, what do you expect? And should you ask the person you're interviewing with what the salary range is? And then also, once you get an offer, should you always counter and negotiate? So I'm sure you all have been asked these kinds of questions in the past and have a point of view.
I'll take this one because it's a little bit of a passion point for me, because I've had some experiences lately. And so I would say I think be upfront, why waste time? Tell somebody what you're looking for in your compensation package. Be upfront with what you have today. If you're comfortable, if the opportunity presents itself and what you need, right? We want to make sure people are not wasting their time with us, as we don't want to waste our time with you. I've had a couple of situations now where we have asked upfront, and we do, ask for salary expectations upfront for our candidates. We do not reveal that to the hiring team in our process. So as on the hiring team, I have no clue about what the candidate's expectations are for their salary until we decide that we want to make an offer to that candidate. However, I've had multiple situations lately where the candidate is coming back and asking for a completely different expectation than what they originally told us in the beginning. And so I think sometimes the candidate might have like lowball their expectations, just trying to like get through the process in the door. And it's caused some frustrations of our hiring teams and us, because we are really betting, on the candidate. We're excited, we're energized, we're ready to make this offer. We're talking to our leaders about the talent that we're recruiting and bringing in the door, because we're measured, whether I'm an HR or hiring manager, on my capability recruit talent and fill positions. And when we get a wide gap, and I'm not talking about 10,000, 20,000, I'm talking about like $40,000, $50,000 gap difference I've seen multiple times lately, then it makes it very hard for us to move forward with a candidate. So I would say absolutely be transparent. A lot of times I think people are assuming that the company's out to get them. I can tell you, that's never been my experience at Eaton, because we are such a values-based organization that it's not, we're going to lowball you at all. We're going to give someone the best offer that's based upon our internal and external market analysis for that role. And so I would say definitely, share what you're looking for up front. It helps me out on the back end, but I definitely understand the hesitation for why somebody may not want to be fully transparent with their compensation needs. I also understand the hesitation for that, particularly for diverse populations and women as well too. But that's why we have our hiring process the way we do at Eaton, and we ask for those expectations up front, and we don't reveal that to the hiring team. Only the recruiter has that information. So I'll let Mariana and Lisa maybe add more color, because they're engaging with candidates before I do in the process.
Yeah, I would just say, do your research. To Francis' point, we always try and make a fair and competitive offer, and we take a lot of things in consideration, market data being one of them. I think that we do make fair and competitive offers. Up to about the counter offer. If you're asking for something and we give you that, it would. I think you're sending a message if you go back and ask for more. So if you're not happy with the offer, absolutely counter. But if you are happy with it and it is an increase, then I would encourage you to accept. But by all means, if you don't feel like, whether that be at your current job today or in the new hiring process, if you don't feel like you're getting paid what you should be, then you need to address that with your manager, because I think we want to retain and have great talent, and I'm sure your organizations do as well. And I think it's our job as individuals to make sure that we get what we deserve. We only get what we ask for, and if you people will respond to what our standards are and what we hold ourselves accountable to. So.
All right. Final question for today. We've covered so much. Thank you all for sharing your wisdom. What if you had to leave a single piece of best advice for job seekers today? What would it be? Francis, I'll start with you.
I'm going to put myself out of the chair of the employer and put myself in the seat of maybe some of our participants. And if I were on the external market today looking for a job externally, I would be very open to learning about experiences. And I would connect with recruiters when they reach out to me, particularly because I find oftentimes that, you may have for yourself, I need to have a manager job. I actually hear this a lot, particularly from people. I'm looking for a director job, I'm looking for a manager job, but I'm not hearing necessarily what the experiences people are looking for. And not all jobs are created equal, not all titles are created equal. A job title doesn't equate the experience that you may, gain in the organization. And so if you open yourself up to the opportunities that are available and entertain those conversations and not have such a narrow focus sometimes in your job search, you may find that you may have more opportunities available to you on the job market than what you may have initially thought were accessible to you in the first place. So, give yourself the opportunity and be open and flexible to different types of criteria than what maybe you even have established for yourself. However, I do understand that there are some things that are non-negotiable that you must have. And by all means, protect the things that are important to you in the job search criteria and that you must have from an employer as well.
Mariana, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, job seeking is exhausting, it's intense, it's difficult, but I would suggest take every interview as an opportunity to develop and expand your professional network. I mean, if you talk to a recruiter, look for their profile on LinkedIn, connect. Believe me, when recruiters or hiring teams talk to a good candidate, even if you're not the person for this role, we will remember you and we will go back to you. So take that as an opportunity. Also, every interview is a learning opportunity. Ask for feedback. It's your right as a candidate to ask for feedback. Take that feedback to grow and, be ready, more ready for the next one.
Yeah, I would say, remember, you could be the perfect fit for the job. You could meet all the qualifications and still not get the job. And don't take it personally. You think about, it's just not a part of your plan and it wasn't meant to be, but don't take that rejection and have it dictate your future. Continue to push forward because it just wasn't the right opportunity for you. So, that I would say is my biggest thing is one of my new favorite shows, from a quote from Ted Lasso. He said, the happiest animal on earth is a goldfish. And it's because they have a 10-second memory. So forget about it and move on and move forward. And you'll land whatever job you land will be where you're supposed to be.
All right. Thank you, Lisa, Mariana, and Francis for joining us today. This was a wonderful conversation. Don't forget it, although you should be a goldfish if you have a bad job experience. I want to thank our attendees for submitting so many great questions and sharing your time with us today. And if any of you are interested in learning more about Eaton's career opportunities, you can visit eaton.com/careers, apply for open roles there, or check out their talent community for future openings. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.